Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a truly fascinating and maybe sometimes a bit unsettling topic: dark psychology. Forget the sensational headlines. This is actually a field that touches, well, pretty much every aspect of our lives, from our day to day interactions all the way up to major global events. We've gathered a really rich stack of sources for this deep dive, and our mission today is to cut through the noise, distill the most important concepts, and equip you with a powerful understanding of how influence, persuasion, and, yeah, manipulation truly work.
And that understanding is absolutely critical. It's not just about recognizing these dynamics when they're pointed at you. It's really about protecting yourself,
Mm.
making more informed decisions, and just navigating this complex world with a bit more confidence. In this area, knowledge truly is your best defense.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We often think of psychology as just, understanding the mind generally. But when we talk about dark psychology, we're actually zooming in on something, well, maybe a bit more primal.
Precisely. It's the study of the human condition, specifically concerning our natural, often unconscious, and emotional predisposition to prey on or even subjugate others. It really delves into those less flattering aspects of human influence.
And what's truly striking is how omnipresent this stuff is.
Mhm.
We're talking friendships, love relationships, every single ad you scroll past, the workplace, the news. It really boils down to this.
Hmm.
You're either going to persuade someone or someone is going to persuade you. Think about it. If you're not actively making your case for that raise, your boss might just convince you that, well, you're not quite ready, and you walk away totally convinced.
That's a perfect everyday example. And it highlights why understanding the crucial distinction, as Richard M. Perloff points out, between persuasion and manipulation is so vital. Persuasion, it aims to influence perceptions or behaviors. It can be ethical, even beneficial. Manipulation, though, that's a different beast. It's social influence using linguistic tricks, devious schemes, sometimes subliminal, definitely deceptive methods. It almost always lacks morality because its function is inherently immoral, often leading to psychological or even physical harm.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting. Our source material highlights something fascinating. We primarily base decisions not on pure logic, but on emotions and assumptions. Manipulators are masters at exploiting what you might call that glimmer, that brief, often unconscious flicker in our decision making where emotion or bias takes over before logic even gets a chance to kick in.
Yeah, our brains actually love those shortcuts. Seriously. In a world just flooded with information, our minds develop cognitive biases, these sort of pre-programmed responses, to simplify decision-making. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But while they're efficient, these shortcuts are exactly what skilled manipulators learn to leverage against us.
Which brings us to a really strong disclaimer from our sources. The tools we're discussing today, they are incredibly potent. It's like a knife, right? In
Yeah.
a chef's hand, it's a tool for creation. In a murderer's hand, well, you get the picture. The impact comes from the user's intention. The knowledge you gain today empowers you to decide how to use it, whether that's for defense, understanding, or maybe something else entirely.
And when we connect this to the bigger picture, looking at the history of persuasion really puts its modern prevalence into perspective. Think back to ancient Greece. Persuasion was mostly used in writing, maybe in debates among the elites. Its reach was, well, incredibly limited. Messages could take weeks to travel.
Totally different world. Fast forward to today, and that landscape is almost unrecognizable. It's honestly hard to wrap your head around just how much we're bombarded. You are literally swimming in thousands of persuasive messages every single day. In the US, some estimates put it up to 3,000 ads alone. Plus, all the face-to-face attempts are constant, right? From that street vendor trying to hand you something to the colleague in the next cubicle trying to get you on board with their idea. There's really no escaping it.
And this huge growth is, well, it's down to technology. The internet, radio, TV, they've dramatically increased the speed and distance over which persuasive messages can travel. It's amplified their power beyond anything the ancients could have even conceived of. It's truly a different ballgame.
Okay, so if we're living in this world saturated with attempts to influence us, how do they actually do it? Like, how do they pull the strings? For that, we really need to turn to a foundational figure who basically mapped out the very weapons they use, Dr. Robert Cialdini. He's this international expert in persuasion, conditioning, negotiation. His 1984 book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, it's practically the Bible on this subject.
Yeah, Cialdini's genius was identifying these specific weapons of influence. And they work because they exploit our natural mental shortcuts, those cognitive biases we mentioned, and our built-in need to simplify decision-making. Our brains use these shortcuts to reduce information overload, but they become vulnerabilities when skilled manipulators know exactly how to trigger them.
Let's walk through each one because this is where the real understanding kicks in for you. First up, reciprocity. This is that instinctive feeling we all have, to return favors. But what's truly mind-bending is how it triggers this feeling of debt, even when the gift is something we never asked for in the first place.
It's exactly right. Think about the tasting technique at the supermarket. They give you a small sample, maybe a piece of cheese, and suddenly you feel almost obliged to buy the product. Or those street stalkers who maybe give you a small flower or trinket, then immediately ask for money. It just bypasses our logic entirely and taps into that deep-seated social pressure to even the score, often, to our own detriment.
And the source warns that you often over-return these gifts, right? Like you give back more than the initial thing was worth because psychologically you want to repay them in a way that feels, I don't know, dignified. So how do you defend against that? Well, maybe avoid accepting offers that clearly feel profit-oriented. If you suspect someone's just a taker, the advice is to simply refuse the gift assertively. And be really wary if someone gives you a positive label right before asking for something, like, you, who are such a smart person, will surely see the value in this.
Ooh, yeah, that's a classic setup.
They might be trying to push you to act consistently with that image they just handed you.
Right. Building on that feeling, but maybe adding urgency. The next principle is scarcity. This basically dictates that we attach greater value to things we perceive as rare or running out. Marketers absolutely love this. They use strategies like time restriction. This offer is only valid until tomorrow night. Or product limitation, only 20 items left.
You see this everywhere, don't you? Booking.com is famous for it, only 3 rooms left at this price. Or airline sites screaming, last 5 seats available. It's incredibly effective because it plays on our primal fear of losing the product, losing the opportunity if we don't act fast. It's that fear of missing out, FOMO, weaponized.
The third weapon is social proof. This is our tendency to believe something is right or good or desirable if lots of other people think so. It's a powerful validation mechanism. It makes us feel safer, following the crowd. Herd mentality, basically.
It's why we obsess over the best reviews on Amazon or TripAdvisor ratings, right? Or Facebook likes, YouTube views. Even fashion trends work exactly like this. If a behavior is widespread, it automatically seems more interesting, more attractive to us. But the defense here is crucial. Just because a lot of people think it's right doesn't mean it's right for you. The most popular choice isn't always the best fit for your unique situation. You got to think for yourself.
Then there's liking. We instinctively tend to like people who are attractive or people who seem similar to us, maybe in how they dress, their interests, their opinions. This exploits what psychologists call the halo effect bias. Basically, positive traits in one area, like physical attractiveness, spill over and make us assume they have other positive traits, like trustworthiness or intelligence.
Which is exactly why influencers and testimonials are so huge on social media. We identify with them, or we aspire to be like them, so we're way more inclined to accept what they're selling or promoting. To defend against this, the source suggests consciously separating the product or service from the person proposing it, trying to assess it objectively. Maybe take some time to evaluate it calmly, without them right there, so you're not just swayed by their charm or good looks.
Good advice. Okay, the fifth principle is authority. This refers to our general sense of deference to authority figures. We tend to obey orders from people in uniform or follow advice from recognized experts or even just people with fancy titles. It's a shortcut for us, right? If an expert says it, it must be true. Saves us the effort of thinking critically.
Exactly. That's why you see dentists in toothpaste ads or famous chefs recommending kitchen brands. Even Cristiano Ronaldo endorsing Herbalife that's pure authority appeal. Lawyers, for example, might wear expensive shirts and nice watches not just for fashion, but to subtly convey professional success and authority, making you trust their judgment more. The defense here is critical. An idea from an authority figure isn't automatically right or wrong just because they said it. You have to evaluate it critically yourself. Their expertise in one field doesn't make them infallible in everything.
Very true. Moving on to commitment and consistency. This principle highlights our tendency to be consistent with what we've said or done before, especially if that commitment was made publicly or in writing. We have this deep psychological need to feel, and perhaps more importantly, to appear consistent with our past choices and statements. Nobody likes being seen as flaky or hypocritical.
Manipulators absolutely exploit this. They often start by getting you to agree to small things first. For instance, someone might ask, "Are you in favor of saving poor children?" Of course, who wouldn't say yes to that? Then they immediately follow up with a request for a donation to support their initiative, relying on your need to act consistently with the value you just expressed. This also ties into the foot in the door technique. They offer something small or cheap first, like a $97 flight. But that asterisk hides conditions that bump the price up to, say, $197. Once you've mentally committed to that initial step, that foot in the door, by maybe agreeing to the low price or stepping into their office, you're much more likely to commit to the bigger, more expensive thing later. You're already invested.
Right, you feel psychologically obligated to follow through. Finally, we have unity, sometimes called groupthink. This is about the powerful influence of the opinions, perceptions, and behaviors of groups we belong to or identify with. It plays on our fundamental need to belong to a community, to feel part of something, which often leads us to conform to group norms, sometimes even against our better judgment.
A classic example is how Apple, very cleverly, kind of created a common enemy in Android devices. It solidified loyalty among Apple users, fostering this sense of us versus them. Solomon Ash's famous 1956 experiment showed this perfectly. About a third of the subjects conformed to an obviously wrong answer given by the rest of the group, just to fit in. So, the defense against this: be aware of these underlying group dynamics. Recognize that you can step outside the group consensus if a product, service, or idea isn't actually right for you, even if everyone else seems to love it. Your individuality matters more than just fitting in.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, underpinning many of these tactics, is that regardless of a manipulator's ultimate goal, lying is almost always their go-to move. It's the bedrock of their playbook, especially when the actual facts don't serve their purpose. Some are even pathological liars, compulsively lying even when there's no obvious benefit.
And the ways they deceive are incredibly varied. You've got your straightforward, flat-out lies, just simple misleading with false info. But then there are the more nuanced tactics, like half-truths and rumors. These are super effective, especially with social media, at just spreading seeds of doubt. The insidious goal isn't necessarily to get you to believe the rumor outright, but just to generate enough partial acceptance or general doubt to damage someone's reputation. It's all about muddying the waters.
Exactly. Then there's denial. This is a form of lying where someone just pretends something didn't happen or hides what did, usually to avoid responsibility. Think about skillful trial attorneys. Their goal isn't always to prove innocence, but maybe just to sow enough confusion and make jurors question the evidence, creating that reasonable doubt.
Right. And closely related is avoidance. This is where manipulators make their targets question every single fact, making it incredibly hard to figure out what's real and what's not. It leaves you feeling totally disoriented.
What's particularly damaging, I think, are generalizations. Those broad blanket statements like all men are or all women are. These are often intended as direct attacks, designed to create animosity and division. It plays right into that classic divide and conquer strategy. Manipulators love weaken a group by turning its members against each other.
And finally, a surprisingly common tactic: playing the victim. We often learn this as kids, right? Crying gets attention from parents. As adults, manipulators use this by acting helpless or put upon to attract attention or gain sympathy. Some people might even, consciously or unconsciously, stay in a state of depression or illness, partly because it gets them a certain kind of attention or allows them to avoid responsibility. It's a really sneaky way to manipulate others into doing what they want, using emotional leverage instead of direct requests.
Okay, so transitioning from those more direct forms of deception, let's explore some even more subtle, maybe more insidious techniques. These are the ones that covertly exploit our emotional and cognitive responses. They're often the favorites of really well-versed manipulators because they operate beneath our conscious radar.
Let's dive in. First up, the yes set technique. This involves asking you a series of questions that are designed to get a yes answer each time. The idea is to create this conditioned pattern of agreement, making you more likely to say yes to the actual request they have hidden at the end. It's like a short-term freezing effect, putting you in a yes mindset. There's that old bar trick, right? Ask someone to repeat the word white 10 times fast, then quickly ask, what does a cow drink? The conditioned answer that often pops out is milk, even though the logical answer is water. It's about setting that response pattern.
Clever. Next, we have linguistic presupposition, or sometimes called embedded commands. This is where a command is skillfully hidden or presupposed within a seemingly innocent question or statement. For instance, if someone asks, "Can you turn off the light?" On the surface, it's a question about your ability. But in reality, they fully expect you to turn off the light, and you probably will. Or think about, do you want to tell me now what's bothering you, or would you rather wait a while? See, they're creating this apparent choice, but they're completely taking for granted that you will tell them eventually. It's a powerful way to guide you subtly towards their desired action.
Very slick. And closely related are negative hidden commands. These are instructions formulated negatively, specifically to bypass your conscious mind's critical guardian. Apparently, the unconscious mind doesn't really process not very well because it thinks in images, and there's no simple image for negation. So if I say, I'm not asking you to go on vacation with me, or you don't have to decide right away, take all the time you need, your conscious mind hears the not. But your unconscious mind might just receive the core command, go on vacation, decide right away, without that critical filter blocking it. It's incredibly sneaky.
It really is. Then there's anchoring or conditioning. This is a super powerful psychological tool used to associate stimuli, sounds, visuals, smells, whatever, with certain feelings or sensations. Think back to Ivan Pavlov's classic experiments with dogs, right? He associated a bell with food, and eventually the dogs would salivate just at the sound of the bell, even with no food present.
And in our daily lives, it's everywhere. It's why the specific jingle of an ice cream truck instantly evokes certain thoughts and feelings, or why brand slogans, logos, and even specific scents used in stores are so powerful. It also applies profoundly to pricing, that common $9.99 as price. It anchors our perception of value, making something feel significantly cheaper than $10. Or how about Starbucks writing your name on the cup? It creates a subtle feeling of ownership and increases the perceived value of that coffee.
Exactly. And Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman studied this extensively. The anchor effect, or anchoring bias, shows how we rely way too heavily on the first piece of information offered, the anchor. Once that anchor is set, even subsequent high prices can seem reasonable by comparison. It fundamentally shifts your baseline perception of value.
Okay, moving to a darker technique, love bombing.
Yes, this involves generating this intense, overwhelming sense of love, confidence, and adherence in a target by literally showering them with excessive affection and attention really quickly. It often targets individuals who are feeling desperate, hopeless, lonely, or particularly vulnerable, maybe after a tough breakup, or if they have low self-esteem.
The manipulator's approach is usually this rapid-fire combination of physical attraction, intense charm, constant flattery, and heavy flirting, all without any genuine intention of building a real, long-term relationship. The consequences can be absolutely devastating. Victims are often left feeling utterly crushed and confused once the bombing inevitably stops and the manipulator moves on or reveals their true motives.
Right. And while sometimes it might seem relatively benign, like maybe just flirting to get access to something or kissing up to a narcissistic boss to get ahead, it's always a strategic maneuver designed to gain something from the target.
And we can't talk about manipulation without mentioning gaslighting.
Yes. Gaslighting is that insidious tactic of making you question your own reality, your own memory, your own sanity. It's commonly used by politicians, for example, who might vehemently deny scandals they were clearly involved in. The aim isn't necessarily to convince you they're innocent, but to generate so much confusion and conflicting information that you start to second-guess yourself, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. The core goal is to disorient you and completely erode your trust in your own perceptions and judgment.
Another powerful trick is mixing lies with truth. The most skilled manipulators are masters at creating incredibly credible illusions by embedding kernels of truth within their broader deceptions. This gives the overall story a veneer of authenticity, making their lies far, far harder to detect. The saying, "the devil is in the details," is really true here for detection. It means you always need to take what you hear with a pretty significant grain of salt.
Then you have leading questions. These are questions specifically worded to trigger a desired response, to lead you down a certain path. For example, asking, "Do you really think so-and-so is that mean?" subtly implies that the person is, in fact, mean, and frames the question around the degree. Manipulators are often very adept at changing their questioning tactics if they sense you're catching on. These are super common in interviews, interrogations, even casual conversation, designed to guide you towards a specific conclusion they want you to reach.
And finally, one that's maybe less psychological but very powerful, economic dependence. This is when manipulators intentionally create financial reliance to compel compliance.
Exactly. Cults, for instance, often induce followers to donate all their property or money, eventually making them entirely dependent on the group for survival. Or some less ethical co-ops might delay paying salaries and then offer employees working partner status in exchange for those unpaid wages, effectively trapping them financially.
The consequence for the target is often isolation and increased vulnerability to mental attacks. When your basic survival feels tied to the manipulator, it's incredibly difficult to push back or leave. You don't adapt, you're stuck.
It's a brutal form of control. And what's truly critical to understanding the mindset of many manipulators is the concept of the dark triad. This refers to a cluster of three distinct but related personality traits: Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. Now, these traits exist on a spectrum in everyone to varying degrees, but they're significantly more prevalent and predominant in chronic manipulators, really driving their behavior.
It always sparks that old nature versus nurture debate, doesn't it? From the source materials perspective, when we look at someone who strongly exhibits these traits, is it more about like a built-in predisposition, or were there environmental factors that essentially train them to be that way?
That's a great question, and yeah, it's complex. The sources suggest that while psychopathy, in particular, can have physiological links, meaning some individuals might be predisposed due to differences in brain structure or chemistry, it's largely believed that these traits are significantly amplified or even primarily developed through upbringing and environmental factors. Often it's a tragic combination, and maybe some inherent tendencies meeting a specific, often harmful or neglectful environment during formative years.
Okay, let's break down the three traits then.
Sure. First, narcissism. At its core, it's self-love taken to an extreme. Narcissists are defined by this inflated sense of entitlement, profound conceit, and an overwhelming need to be the center of attention constantly. They are often control freaks who relentlessly seek admiration, praise, and ego stroking. The key thing is, once they get what they want from someone, that admiration or control, they often become bored very quickly and move on to seek new sources of validation, new narcissistic supply. The initial thrill of conquest fades fast.
Okay. Then there's Machiavellianism, named after the political thinker Machiavelli.
Right. This trait describes individuals who are highly cunning, calculating, strategic, and methodical in their interactions. They tend to see other people primarily as a means to an end, as pawns to be used and then discarded without much, if any, regard for their feelings or well-being. They are ruthlessly pragmatic in pursuing their own goals, always playing chess while everyone else might be playing checkers.
Got it. And finally, psychopathy.
Psychopathy can stem from physiological issues, like differences in brain areas related to emotion processing, leading to flat emotional reactions and a profound lack of empathy. Or can be psychological, sometimes described as a dissociative personality that might result from severe, prolonged abuse or trauma, especially in childhood. These individuals seem to disconnect their feelings from their mental processes, allowing them to act callously or cruelly without experiencing the normal emotional consequences like guilt or remorse.
The danger here sounds pretty profound. Even just one of these traits fully developed in someone could lead to really problematic behavior, right? But when all three come together, even if not at the absolute extreme, you're potentially looking at individuals who may have very little in the way of morals, scruples, or ethics. Maybe they don't become, serial killers, but they can engage in incredibly harmful activities, elaborate business scams, relentless political maneuvering, destroying relationships with people just falling by the wayside like collateral damage. It's less about overt violence sometimes and more about the systematic, emotional, or financial destruction.
That's a good way to put it. But it's also really important to reiterate. These traits exist in all of us to some degree. Nobody is purely one thing. Recognizing their potential manifestation in our own lives, even subtly maybe tendencies towards manipulation when we feel insecure, or moments of entitlement can prompt valuable introspection. It helps us manage them before they become predominant and lead us down unhealthy paths in our interactions.
That's a really important point. Okay, let's explore how these dark psychology techniques actually manifest in real-world contexts, because this is where it all truly clicks, I think. First up, dark seduction. Sounds ominous.
It can be. Dark seduction is basically about using romantic or sexual overtures, charm, flattery, physical attraction, not just for mutual intimacy, but specifically to gain someone's confidence and then extract other benefits from them. The manipulator isn't interested in a genuine connection. They're looking to exploit their target for something else entirely, whether that's money, status, information, or just control.
And the techniques involved often include leveraging physical attractiveness, using that intense charm and flirting we talked about with love bombing, but with zero intention of a real relationship, and sometimes even overt sexual advances used strategically. The danger, as the source points out, is that really attractive manipulators can be incredibly hard to spot. Their charm is disarming. Victims can easily lose their sense of reality, getting swept up in the intensity, which leads to deeper control and exploitation, often leaving them feeling devastated and used afterwards.
Exactly. Next, let's talk about toxic relationships. A toxic relationship is essentially any relationship, romantic, familial, workplace, friendship that consistently causes harm, whether that's physical, emotional, or psychological, to at least one of the people involved. And the harm is often subtle, isn't it? It's insidious, like a slow poison, profoundly damaging over time, chipping away at one's self-worth and well-being.
Yeah, the dynamic is usually that the victim finds themselves putting in far more effort, emotion, and resources than they ever get back. And it can become this kind of functional addiction for both parties. The manipulator gets addicted to the power and control they wield, and the victim might become addicted to the intermittent reinforcement, those occasional moments of perceived acknowledgement, or the persistent, often futile, hope that things will eventually get better.
hmm Signs that you might be in one. Consistently feeling bad, drained, or anxious after interacting with certain people, being constantly dragged down or criticized by colleagues. Having those overbearing bosses who micromanage everything, centralize all decisions, and stifle any autonomy. Emotional exhaustion is a huge red flag. If you find yourself thinking, I'd rather go through a root canal than go to work today, that's a pretty clear sign your energy is being systematically drained by a toxic environment or relationship.
And as abuse deepens in these relationships, it can manifest in really overt ways like emotional blackmail, relentless gaslighting, making you doubt your sanity, constant guilt tripping, shifting blame for everything onto you. Ultimately, it leads to a shattering of the victim's self-esteem, making them feel worthless, dependent, and unable to leave.
It's a destructive cycle. Another chilling application is brainwashing. And no, this isn't just something out of spy movies.
Right. How does the source material describe it?
Brainwashing is described as a gradual, systematic process aimed at altering a person's fundamental perception of reality. It involves replacing their core beliefs, values, and ideas with a new set, dictated by the manipulator. This is often achieved through intense psychological pressure, prolonged isolation from previous support systems, and sometimes the use or threat of negative consequences, a form of negative reinforcement to compel compliance.
The source gives that hypothetical, maybe extreme example of forcing someone to quit smoking through beatings. Every time they smoke, they face a severe negative consequence, instilling such fear that they eventually stop the behavior. While brutal, it illustrates the core principle. Or, on a societal level, you could see things like prison sentences for criminals as a form of deterrence, using negative consequences to discourage unwanted behavior. Brainwashing takes this to an individual, coercive level.
Exactly. The impact of successful brainwashing can be a truly fragmented psyche. The victim loses touch with their own previous reality, their own sense of self, becoming increasingly susceptible and dependent on the manipulator's version of truth. It's terrifying to consider how fragile our own perceptions can be under sustained pressure.
It really is. What are some specific tactics used in brainwashing?
Key tactics include systematically undermining self-esteem through constant criticism. You're not good enough, you can't do anything right, to create emotional dependence. Isolation is crucial, physically removing the target or systematically alienating them from their existing support networks, family, friends, community, to make them solely reliant on the manipulator for information and social connection. This is classic in cults, but also happens in controlling romantic relationships. And exploiting fear and dependence, tapping into primal fuels for survival, fight or flight responses, to foster absolute reliance on the manipulator for safety or well-being.
Are there actual studies on this? It seems ethically impossible to study directly.
You're right. No ethical clinical studies can directly induce brainwashing to prove its effectiveness. But there's a vast amount of research into related areas: trauma, coercive control, thought reform, personality modification under duress, that clearly illustrates how these psychological processes work and the devastating effects they can have.
Okay, let's look at how manipulators operate in specific professions where influence is key. Lawyers, for example.
Oh, absolutely. Lawyers, especially trial lawyers, can be seen as textbook manipulators in some ways, operating within legal bounds, of course. They cannot overtly lie to the court, but they're absolute masters at framing the truth to their advantage. They skillfully mix half-truths with omissions to sow doubt, pick holes in opposing stories, expertly rephrase statements, and take witness testimony out of context. You could argue it's a form of gaslighting, using evidence and rhetoric to construct a version of reality that benefits their client, often aiming to confuse rather than clarify.
Interesting perspective. What about salespeople?
Salespeople often need to be outgoing, extroverted. Some might lean towards narcissistic traits, enjoying the performance and flaunting their persuasive talents. They have to master communication, understand triggers, and use pretty much every technique we've discussed, scarcity, social proof, liking, authority, to close that deal.
And public speakers.
Master communicators, whether they're politicians, motivational speakers, or CEOs, they need to understand exactly what makes people pick their hopes, fears, desires to get their message across effectively and sway opinion, whether for good or ill.
And perhaps the most extreme professional example, cult leaders.
Yes. These individuals are often profoundly narcissistic and ego-driven, typically viewing their followers as mere pawns for their own gratification or power. They skillfully combine fringe or appealing beliefs, sometimes the potential for violence or extreme control, and a highly charismatic, almost messianic personality to exert extraordinary influence over their adherents, leveraging isolation, love-bombing, fear, and brainwashing techniques to maintain control.
Chilling stuff. Now, let's zoom out from these individual interactions to mass manipulation strategies, techniques used on large groups, sometimes entire societies. These are often unseen forces shaping our collective reality.
Right? These operate on a much grander scale. One key strategy discussed is the distraction strategy. This involves preventing the public from paying attention to important social issues or gaining essential knowledge by constantly flooding the media landscape with distractions, trivial entertainment, minor scandals, sensational but irrelevant news keeping people busy, overwhelmed, and disengaged from what truly matters.
Then there's the gradual strategy, often called the boiled frog principle. The idea here, supposedly linked back to old university research, is that you can introduce unacceptable changes gradually, little by little, over years, making them almost imperceptible. Think about the slow erosion of workers' rights or environmental protections in some places. If those changes happened all at once, there'd likely be massive public outcry. But implemented slowly, incrementally, they become the new normal before people fully realize what they've lost. Like a frog in slowly heating water, not jumping out until it's too late.
A very potent analogy. We also see the strategy of delaying gratification. This keeps the public's focus on promised future benefits. Sacrifice now for a better tomorrow. Rather than demanding solutions to painful current problems, it pushes accountability perpetually into the future.
And the infantilization of the public. This is where governing bodies or media treat adults like children, simplifying complex issues excessively, using overly emotional appeals, and presenting leaders as paternalistic father figures who know best. It discourages critical thinking and encourages passive acceptance.
A crucial one is taking advantage of the emotional aspect. Messages from power structures often aim to bypass our rational, critical minds entirely, directly targeting our emotions, fear, desire, patriotism, anger. This creates a short circuit on analytical thought, making us more susceptible to having ideas, desires, fears, or specific behaviors implanted directly into our unconscious. Emotion trumps logic in mass persuasion.
The strategies continue with keeping the public ignorant. This isn't just neglect. It can involve actively suppressing curiosity, deliberately lowering the quality of public education, or creating huge discrepancies between elite private education and mass public education. The goal is to prevent the general population from having the analytical tools needed to understand and critique the system.
Along similar lines is making the public complacent. This involves promoting, through media and advertising, lifestyles focused on the ephemeral, the unnecessary, even the ridiculous. Creating mass tastes for superficial consumption distracts people from more substantial societal issues and channels their energy into passive consumerism.
And a particularly insidious one, reinforcing self-blame. This strategy works by making individuals believe that their misfortunes, unemployment, poverty, lack of success, are solely due to their own insufficient intelligence, effort, or ability.
Exactly. This prevents people from questioning the system or recognizing systemic inequalities. Instead, they feel guilty, inadequate, and lapse into depressive states, which inhibits any potential for collective action or rebellion. It internalizes systemic failure as personal failing.
Wow. And finally, maybe the most overarching one, knowing people better than they know themselves.
Right. Thanks to huge advances in biology, neuroscience, and applied psychology over the last half-century or so, the system, meaning governments, corporations, data brokers, has gained an increasingly sophisticated understanding of human psychology. This allows them to exert greater influence and control over individuals than individuals often have over themselves, leveraging deep psychological insights to predict, nudge, and manipulate behavior on a massive scale.
Okay, that's the big picture. Let's drill down now into some specific, actionable tricks that manipulators use in more direct, subtle influence situations. These are like the micro-level maneuvers you might encounter day to day.
Good idea. The first one is using suggestive words. Simple phrases embedded in conversation like, just try to believe it. Or, you might find yourself agreeing, can unconsciously build trust and rapport. They subtly suggest confidence and acceptance, making the listener more receptive to the actual proposal.
Then there's that fascinating one. Nod slightly, and they will agree with you. How does that work again?
It taps into our mirror neurons. If you nod subtly while you're speaking or asking a question, the person you're talking to has an unconscious tendency to mirror that movement. That slight physical act of nodding can actually trigger a corresponding internal feeling of agreement in their brain, making them statistically more likely to verbally agree with you too. It's like you're physically leading them towards a yes, just don't overdo it or it becomes obvious.
Right, subtlety is key. What about use similarity to surprise your opponent?
This is more of a rhetorical technique. You create a strong, perhaps unexpected comparison between two different things or identities, highlighting a shared quality. If done well, it can create a sudden moment of insight or resonance for the listener, hitting the mark powerfully and making your point more persuasive by framing it in a novel way they connect with.
Okay, here's a really powerful one, the sensory overload.
Yeah, this exploits the limits of our conscious mind. We can only actively process about, say, 7 pieces of information at once. So a manipulator might intentionally overload your conscious mind by hitting you with rapid-fire information, asking multiple questions quickly, or using multiple stimuli simultaneously, touching your arm while talking fast and showing you something visual. This creates a brief moment of mental confusion, like your processor just crashed. In that fleeting, altered state, your critical filters are down, and any suggestions given can slip through much more easily and be accepted. It's like a momentary window for instantaneous hypnosis.
Wow. Okay, the exaggeration model, how does that play out?
This involves taking something your conversation partner says and deliberately exaggerating or distorting its meaning, often twisting it into an emotional accusation to put them on the defensive. For example, if a skincare salesperson says, "This cream will make your skin look younger," and you reply, "I'm not really focused on looking younger right now," they might shoot back with something like, "Oh, so you're saying you don't care at all what your skin looks like." See? They've twisted your neutral statement into an implication you didn't intend, forcing you to justify yourself.
Nasty. Okay, offer a painful choice.
This is about structuring a decision so that one option is presented as clearly undesirable or painful, making the other option, the one the manipulator actually wants you to choose, seem like the only reasonable or inevitable path. Think of the classic red pill or blue pill scenario in The Matrix. One choice represents uncomfortable truth, the other blissful ignorance. By framing one choice negatively, you steer the person towards the alternative you prefer.
Makes sense. How about reinforced truisms?
This technique involves making a series of statements, maybe 5 or more, that are undeniably true and easy to agree with. It's a nice day, isn't it? Quite. We all want to be successful, right? Taking care of family is important, don't you agree? The idea is to condition the listener's mind to get into a pattern of saying yes, internally or externally. After this series of easy agreements, you slip in your actual suggestion or request. They're now psychologically primed to respond yes to that too, adding little strengtheners like, "Isn't it?" Right? Or, "Do you agree?" Sorient, especially combined with a subtle nod, can apparently increase the probability of getting that final yes by up to 40%. You're essentially programming a yes response.
That's quite specific. Finally, the simple bind, or illusion of alternative.
Right. The famous therapeutic hypnotist Milton H. Erickson was a master of this. He reportedly said something like, "I like to give my patients as many choices as possible to do what I want them to do." This technique gives the appearance of a choice, but in reality, both options lead to the outcome the manipulator desires. We saw it earlier. Do you want to tell me now what's bothering you, or would you rather wait a while? Either way, the presupposition is that you are going to tell them. You feel like you have a choice, but you're trapped within the manipulator's frame.
Okay, understanding all these techniques is one thing, but how do we actually detect deception when it's happening? This seems critical, not just for jobs like security or HR, but just in our everyday personal lives.
Absolutely. Knowing what to look for is your first line of defense. The source material highlights several key behavioral indicators.
Let's start with the eyes. They're often called the window to the soul, right? What should we look for?
Several things. Breaking eye contact, especially if it happens suddenly after a conversation starts comfortably, can indicate a shift. Maybe shame, discomfort, or the cognitive load of constructing a lie. Prolonged eye closure, blinking slowly and keeping eyes shut for more than a second or two when answering a question is considered a pretty strong indicator of deception. Also, the direction of gaze can be a clue, though it's not foolproof and depends on handedness. For most right-handed people, looking up and to their left while speaking might suggest they are constructing an image or sound lying, whereas looking up and to their right often indicates recalling an actual memory, truth.
Interesting. And direct eye contact.
Generally, direct, steady eye contact tends to signal truthfulness and confidence, though experienced liars know this and might deliberately hold eye contact too intensely to seem honest, which can also feel unnatural.
What about body language more broadly?
Look for incongruence. Does their body language match their words? If someone is saying yes but subtly shaking their head no, trust the body language. Also, signs of nervousness like fast, shallow breathing due to increased heart rate from stress or fear, fidgeting, playing with hair, tapping fingers, shifting weight excessively, or conversely, abnormal stillness or rigidity can all indicate deception as they try to control their movements.
What about posture?
Slouching might sometimes be an attempt to appear less confident or threatening, or ironically, a subconscious attempt to boost confidence when feeling insecure while lying. Yawning inappropriately or excessive stretching might be misdirection tactics.
And the hands. Anything specific there?
Liars might subconsciously try to hide their hands, folding their palms inward, putting hands in pockets, sitting on them. They might try to occupy minimum physical space, appearing smaller. Trembling fingers or hands, if not due to a medical condition, can signal anxiety associated with lying. They might also cover other appendages, like fiddling with a sleeve to cover their wrist, almost like trying to physically conceal the truth.
Okay, facial expressions beyond the eyes.
Frequent blinking is a key one. The normal blink rate is much lower, but under stress or the cognitive load of lying, blinking can increase significantly, maybe 4 or 5 times rapidly within less than a minute. Also, watch for micro-expressions, those fleeting flashes of true emotion that leak out before the liar can mask them.
And finally, voice variation.
Listen for trembling sounds, a higher pitch than usual, or an inconsistent tone, especially when answering complex or challenging questions. These can indicate fear, stress, or the defense mechanisms kicking in during deception. The voice often betrays what the words are trying so hard to hide.
Now, the source makes a distinction between big lies and white lies. Can you clarify that?
Sure, both involve intentional deception, obviously. But big lies are typically told for significant personal gain, often involving exploitation or causing substantial harm to others. Think about a used car dealer knowingly selling a dangerously faulty car as perfectly fine, or larger societal lies like the white supremacist narrative used historically to justify oppression. The intent is malicious or grossly self-serving. White lies, on the other hand, are usually told with less harmful intent, often to avoid hurting someone's feelings unnecessarily, to keep oneself out of minor trouble, or perhaps to dodge an awkward social situation or minor responsibility. The stakes are generally much lower.
So when is generally considered okay, or at least socially acceptable, to tell a white lie?
The source suggests it's often fine in situations of politeness. When someone asks, "How are you?" As a greeting, a simple "fine, thanks" is usually expected, even if you're having a terrible day. Or complimenting someone's new haircut that you secretly dislike telling the truth would just be needlessly cruel, especially if they can't change it immediately. Maybe also telling a small fib if you're a few minutes late for work to avoid getting into unnecessary trouble, assuming it doesn't impact anyone else significantly.
Okay, but when is it definitely not okay to tell a white lie? When does honesty become essential, even if it's uncomfortable?
It's not okay when you need to convey genuinely important information that someone needs to know for their own safety or well-being. It's generally not okay when ending a relationship, stringing someone along with false hope, is cruel. And it's usually not okay when someone genuinely needs constructive criticism or a wake-up call to improve. Think about telling a friend their artistic performance was amazing when it was truly dreadful. That doesn't help them grow. Sometimes uncomfortable honesty is necessary for progress or clarity.
That makes sense. Okay, beyond just detecting lies, how do we actively protect ourselves from manipulation? What concrete strategies does the source offer?
This is really the crucial takeaway. First and foremost, a foundational principle: know your rights. Especially in potentially abusive relationships or situations, it is absolutely critical to remember that no one has the right to inflict physical, emotional, or psychological harm on you. Establishing and holding that boundary is step one.
What if you're already in a bad situation?
Then, sometimes the best and bravest course of action is to simply stay away or get away. In clearly abusive relationships, whether romantic, familial, or workplace, trying to save the relationship or fix the manipulator is often impossible and can be dangerous. Divorce, quitting the job, cutting contact might truly be the necessary path for your own mental, emotional, and even physical health.
Okay. What else?
If you detect manipulation attempts happening in the moment, you must not let the manipulator proceed. Stop them directly. Call out the behavior if possible and safe. Set clear boundaries. If needed, seek help or support from others, friends, family, HR, authorities. Don't just let it slide.
It also sounds exhausting dealing with this constantly.
It absolutely is, which leads
Mhm.
to the next point. Know when to quit. Dealing with a persistent manipulator can become this incredibly draining war of attrition. You pour all your energy into defending yourself, and they thrive on the conflict. Recognize when it's become futile, when the cost to your well-being is too high, and disengage. Preserve your energy.
And internally, for our own resilience.
Develop a strong mental state. This involves consciously working to view negative experiences not just as setbacks, but as lessons learned. Cultivate emotional maturity and resilience. This mindset helps you bounce back from attempts to undermine you. It's also essential to practice keeping a level head during interactions. Staying calm, thinking clearly, and not reacting emotionally in the moment is vital to nip any manipulation attempts in the bud before they escalate. Panic or anger makes you more vulnerable. Be an action taker in protecting your mental space. Proactively disconnect from overwhelming or negative stimuli when you can. Practices like meditation. Mindfulness can help. Limit exposure to potentially manipulative media. And most importantly, always cultivate a critical mind. Question everything you see and hear. Don't just passively accept information. These are your active defenses. Building on this idea of detection and understanding, let's deepen our knowledge of nonverbal communication, because often what isn't said or how something is conveyed physically speaks the loudest. These cues operate largely at an unconscious level, both for the sender and receiver, giving us profound insights into true intentions that words might try to conceal.
That's so true. The source mentions how nonverbal signals interact with verbal messages in different ways, right? Like repetition, where a gesture reinforces words, or contradiction, where the body language clashes with the words, a huge red flag for untruthfulness.
Exactly. They can also serve as substitution, where a nonverbal cue replaces words entirely, like a shrug, meaning I don't know, or complimenting, where they enhance or modify the verbal message, adding emotional nuance or emphasis.
Let's focus on a few key areas of nonverbal communication that are particularly telling. Facial expressions, for instance. We know there are universal emotions, right? Like sadness, joy, fear.
Yes, generally recognized across cultures.
Mhm.
Sadness, joy, fear, anger, surprise, disgust, contempt, and happiness. But beyond the obvious expressions, pay attention to micro-expressions. These are incredibly brief, involuntary flashes of true feeling that leak out maybe just a fraction of a second before someone can consciously mask them. They're very hard to fake and can betray hidden emotions.
What other facial cues?
Subtle movements around the eyebrows, raised in surprise, furrowed in anger or concentration. The eyes, wide open in fear, an intense stare indicating aggression or focus, sideways glances suggesting suspicion, darting eyes nervousness, changes in blinking rate, and the mouth, chewing the lip indicating anxiety, covering the lips perhaps hiding something, pursed lips disapproval, biting the lip stress, corners turned up or down reflecting mood. All these tiny details add up.
Okay, what about gestures and hands?
Gestures can be highly cultural. Think about how the meaning of a hand sign can vary drastically from place to place, but some are more universal. A clenched fist usually signals anger or tension. Crossed arms can indicate defensiveness or feeling closed off. Hands on hips might convey confidence or defiance. Hands clasped behind the back could be superiority or deep thought. Even how someone crosses their legs can signal openness or being closed off. Open palms often suggest honesty or openness. Pointing, of course, can be directive, but often considered rude.
And posture, how we hold ourselves.
Posture conveys a lot about attitude, confidence, and personality. Sitting or standing straight generally signals confidence and engagement. Slouching might appear lazy, bored, or defensive. Leaning in toward someone usually shows interest, while leaning away suggests disinterest or disagreement. Even the direction your body is pointing can indicate where your attention truly lies.
Head position, too.
Yep. Lowering the head can indicate insecurity, submission, or shame. Raising the head or tilting it slightly often signals interest or curiosity.
And proximity or personal space, that feels important.
Hugely important. We all have these invisible bubbles of personal space, and the acceptable distance depends on the relationship and context. The source mentions typical zones. Intimate space, maybe 6 to 18 inches. For close partners, family, personal space, 1.5 to 4 feet. For friends, colleagues. Social space, 4 to 12 feet. For formal interactions, acquaintances. And public space, 12 to 25 plus feet. for public speaking or addressing a crowd. A manipulator might intentionally violate these norms, getting too close too quickly to make you uncomfortable, assert dominance, or create a false, manipulative sense of intimacy. Pay attention to how someone uses space around you.
Finally, vocal dynamics, not what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly. Things like breathing deep, controlled breathing supports vocal projection and conveys calmness and power. Pitch inflections varying your tone prevents monotony and can reveal excitement, enthusiasm, or uncertainty. Voice quality itself can be perceived as harsh, breathy, nasal, or pleasant, affecting how the message lands.
And the source calls this paralinguistic communication.
Right. It's all those vocal cues besides the actual words. The rate or speed of speech. Fast can mean nervous or excited. Slow can mean deliberate or bored. The rhythm and cadence, the volume, the overall pitch. These cues reveal a lot about underlying emotions. Interestingly, skilled communicators or manipulators might also subtly match their vocal rhythm and tone to the person they're speaking with a technique called pacing to build rapport and make the other person feel more unconsciously connected and agreeable.
Wow. All of this connects back to the power of our mind, right? How our different mental states influence this behavior.
Precisely. The source talks about different general human mind states. There's the engaged mind, when you're fully present, immersed in the current moment and activity. There's the automatic mind, which handles impulsive responses, quick judgments, learned habits. It's essential for survival, reacting quickly without conscious thought. And there's the analytical mind, which allows us to step back, reflect, engage in complex reasoning, and make deliberate choices. Manipulators often try to bypass your analytical mind and trigger responses directly from your automatic emotional mind.
And that often involves targeting our deeper, more primal brain systems.
Exactly. The limbic brain system is that evolutionarily older, powerful core responsible for much of our unconscious behavior and strong emotional responses. It governs feelings like pain and pleasure, fear and peace, our sexual drive, social bonding, and basic survival needs like hunger and thirst.
What are the key parts there?
Key players include the hypothalamus, regulating hunger, thirst, sex drive, pleasure. The amygdala, crucial for interpreting emotions, especially fear. It's like your brain's alarm bell. And the hippocampus, involved in forming long-term memories, which are often linked with strong emotions. A skilled manipulator knows, intuitively or explicitly, how to trigger these limbic responses, how to ring that amygdala alarm bell with fear tactics, or stimulate the hypothalamus with promises of pleasure or belonging. They aim to make you react impulsively from this emotional core rather than thinking logically with your newer brain regions.
And beneath even that, there's the really old part of the brain.
Yes, sometimes called the old brain or reptilian brain. This innermost area is responsible for our most basic survival instincts and automatic functions. You have the medulla controlling heart rate and breathing, the pons involved in movements and balance, the reticular formation acting like a filter for stimuli and regulating cycles like walking, eating, sex, and sleep. These are the absolute bedrock functions, often operating completely outside our awareness, but still influencing our state and receptiveness.
And from all these deep-seated biological elements, combined with our genes and our unique life experiences and environment, our individual personality forms. That unique, relatively stable pattern of thoughts, behaviors, and feelings that defines who we are.
Right. And various personality frameworks try to categorize these patterns. Some are drawn from the work of Carl Jung, for example, highlighting key preferences that manipulators might subtly exploit.
Like introversion versus extroversion?
Yes, where people draw their social energy from inward reflection or outward interaction. Another key Jungian dimension is sensing versus intuition. Sensing types tend to process information through their five senses, focusing on the concrete details of the immediate environment, facts, and past experience. They might be more susceptible to detailed, practical arguments or demonstrations. Intuition types, on the other hand, tend to process information by looking for patterns, possibilities, and the bigger picture, focusing more on future potential than present reality. They might be more easily swayed by grand visions, abstract promises, or appeals to potential.
The source mentions specific Jungian types briefly.
Yes, things like ISTJ, responsible logical, ISFJ, warm, considerate, ISTP, analytical practical, ISFP, gentle, adaptable, ESTJ, organized, decisive, ENFJ, charismatic, persuasive, ENFP, enthusiastic, creative, INTJ, strategic, independent, each with its own typical way of interacting with the world, which a manipulator could potentially tailor their approach to.
Other frameworks, too.
Briefly, judging versus perceiving, which describes whether someone prefers a more structured, planned approach to life, judging, or a more flexible, spontaneous one, perceiving. And the ancient Greek concept of the four temperaments, melancholic, analytical, quiet, choleric, ambitious, dominant, phlegmatic, relaxed, peaceful, and sanguine, outgoing, sociable. These are broad strokes, but they highlight how different inherent tendencies can influence susceptibility to different persuasive approaches.
Okay, let's apply these persuasion principles to some specific everyday contexts. We see them everywhere, especially in business, right?
Oh, constantly. In sales, techniques like commitment and consistency, getting small agreements first, reciprocity, offering a small discount or freebie, social proof, using testimonials or highlighting popularity, and scarcity, limited time offer are absolute staples. Salespeople rely on these psychological triggers to overcome objections and close deals.
And in marketing more broadly.
Very similar principles. Marketing aims to create positive feelings associated with a brand, reciprocity, liking. Build trust through credible spokespeople or endorsements authority. Show that others are buying or using the product, social proof. Involve customers perhaps through feedback or customization, commitment. Make customers feel valued and similar to the brand's image, liking. And promote exclusivity or rarity, scarcity. Every ad campaign is likely using several of these deliberately.
What about negotiation? That seems like pure persuasion.
It really is. Effective negotiation is all about getting your goals met, while often needing to give the other party at least the perception that they've also gained something significant or won. Skilled negotiators are masters of framing, anchoring, managing expectations, and using persuasive language to make the other party feel satisfied with the outcome, even when the primary benefit might actually flow to the negotiator. It's a delicate psychological dance of give and take, or perceived give and take.
Okay, shifting gears. Persuasion in relationships and sex. How does that work?
In dating, persuasion is almost always emotion-driven, not logical. Trying to win someone over with intellectual arguments usually falls flat. Instead, it's about showing empathy, especially if they've just been through a breakup, projecting confidence and leadership, which often signals security, or adopting a laid-back attitude if they seem defensive. It's about sparking attraction and building rapport on an emotional level.
What about within the family?
In family dynamics, persuasion often revolves around aligning on shared values and goals. When family members are fundamentally not on the same page regarding core values, it can lead to a deep loss of respect and create constant friction and conflict. Persuading family members often involves appealing to those shared values or finding common ground.
And sexual encounters. The source touches on this carefully.
Yes, and it's crucial to be clear here. Persuasion in this context is about sparking mutual affinity, desire, and leading towards consensual encounters by manifesting genuine passion, connection, and feelings. The source is absolutely explicit that these techniques are never intended or acceptable for manipulating someone into non-consensual acts. It's purely about enhancing mutual attraction and navigating the path towards a shared, desired experience between consenting adults.
Understood. This brings us to the critical power of empathy. How is that defined here?
Empathy is presented as the ability to genuinely feel what others are feeling at various levels. It involves understanding their body language intuitively, grasping their emotional state, and often offering a calming, supportive presence precisely because you truly connect with where they're coming from emotionally. It's distinct from sympathy, which is more about understanding someone's situation intellectually. Oh, that sounds tough. Without necessarily fully appreciating or sharing the feeling itself.
And the source draws a line between true empaths and manipulative ones.
Yes. It highlights the crucial difference between truly empathic individuals who generally act out of genuine goodwill and compassion and don't seek attention for their kindness, versus what might be called manipulative humanitarians or covert narcissists. These manipulators might use charitable acts or displays of compassion as a front. Their real goal might be to gain attention, exert control, acquire wealth or status, or build their personal brand rather than genuinely helping others. They weaponize the appearance of compassion for selfish ends. It's important to discern the underlying motive.
Okay, that's a vital distinction. Now let's bring this all together by looking at some infamous manipulators from history, real-world case studies to see these principles in stark action. First, Bernie Madoff.
Madoff is a chilling example. Described often as a classic narcissist with strong psychopathic tendencies, he was outwardly charming, incredibly calm, always appearing to be in absolute control, even when his world was collapsing. His true manipulative genius lay in his ability to build and sustain a completely convincing alternate reality for his investors. He blurred the lines between fact and fantasy with such mastery that even sophisticated financial minds, people who should have known better, were completely taken in for decades.
And his lack of remorse was striking, wasn't it? He pled guilty mainly on legal advice, seemingly without genuine conscience, reportedly viewing his victims as simply greedy or naive for trusting him.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember, as the source points out, his victims weren't just the ultra-wealthy. He devastated ordinary families, charities, pension funds, people who lost everything. His ability to construct that elaborate, fraudulent reality and maintain the facade for so long was a terrifying masterclass in sustained, large-scale manipulation.
Okay, next. Charles Manson. A very different kind of manipulator.
Very different context, yes. Manson primarily used a kind of seductive pseudo-paternal charm to prey on incredibly vulnerable individuals, often young women, runaways, people with very little sense of self or belonging who were desperately seeking family and purpose in the counterculture era.
The source debunks the myths of him having demonic powers or supernatural influence, right?
Absolutely. His influence wasn't mystical. It stemmed from his unnerving ability to recognize and exploit the primal needs and deep-seated fears in these lost individuals. He created dependency through shared living, isolation from the outside world, drug use, especially LSD, and a constant barrage of his own distorted philosophy, often mixing lies and half-truths with twisted interpretations of scripture or popular culture, like Beatles songs. His own unwavering confidence, however delusional, was enough to convince these scared, impressionable followers that they had found a new family and a new, albeit terrifying, truth. He's a textbook case of using rudimentary psychological control to achieve horrific ends.
Finally, Adolf Hitler. Perhaps the most devastating example of mass manipulation in history.
Hitler rose to power during a time of utter desperation in Germany, economic collapse, national humiliation after World War I. He brilliantly articulated the nation's suffering and skillfully provided a simple, hateful scapegoat, the Jewish people. He expertly used fear, nationalism, and anger to galvanize support. He was, by all accounts, a mesmerizing public speaker who masterfully mixed outright lies with just enough kernels of truth or relatable grievances to create a compelling, albeit monstrous, alternate reality for an entire nation, tragically guiding them down a path of unspeakable horror.
The source highlights the 1936 Berlin Olympics as a specific manipulation tactic.
Oh. Yes, a chilling example of mass distraction and deception on a global scale. Germany hosted this incredible international event, meticulously staged to present an image of a peaceful, modern, and tolerant nation to the world. It was a grand performance designed to lure the international community into a false sense of security, to hide Hitler's true, terrifying agenda of persecution and military expansion just before he fully enacted his plans. And largely, the world was fooled, charmed by the spectacle, completely missing or ignoring the ominous signs. It shows how powerful manipulation can be, even on the world stage.
Okay, wow. We have really unpacked a lot today. From the roots of ancient persuasion to modern digital manipulation, brainwashing tactics, the dark triad, and that intricate, often invisible dance of human influence. Hopefully, you now have a much more powerful lens through which to view the world, a better understanding of the subtle and sometimes overt ways manipulation can play out in your life.
Absolutely. And understanding these techniques, recognizing them when they appear, is just so crucial. It's vital for your own protection, certainly, but also for navigating your relationships more healthily, understanding your career dynamics better, and engaging more critically with media and society as a whole. Remember, critical thinking, self-awareness, and trusting your gut instinct. These are your absolute best defenses in this complex landscape.
Exactly. And becoming really adept at recognizing and responding effectively to these dynamics, well, it takes time and conscious practice. So keep that critical mind sharp, keep observing, keep assessing what's happening around you and within you. The more you practice recognizing these patterns, the clearer the world and people's intentions can become. So here's a final thought to leave you with. If the world is a stage, and it often seems like everyone is trying to move mountains in one direction or another, how will you use your newfound understanding of these hidden forces of influence to decide whether you are the one moving the mountains or whether you are simply being moved by them?